Hello and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Sa. Tonight we will be focusing on Donald Trump's second term as he has assumed office as the 47th President of United States. And when we look at his inaugural address, of course, he addressed key issues. And in today's program, we will be diving into all those issues. In his address, Trump declared the beginning of a golden age for America. And he promised to end what he called the country's decline. When we look at his plans, his key plans included stricter immigration policies as well as changes to economy and of course ending diversity programs. We will also be talking about his plans about Paris agreements and also how he focused on energy, of course, emergency in America and in the country. To discuss this and more, we are joined we're joined online by Professor Scott Lucas, who is political analyst. Welcome to the program. And we are also joined by Mr. Faiz Rahman, who is journalist. Welcome to the program. Mr. Lucas, let me start with you. Of course, when we look at Donald Trump's speech, inaugural address, what are your key takeaways from this speech?
Well, once you get past the rhetoric about American Golden Age, there were really two things that were notable about the speech. The first is it wasn't as much about foreign or domestic policy as much as a me speech. He complained about barbarism. In other words, he complained about political accountability, going all the way back to his attempt to overturn the 2020 election. He complained about the Justice Department. Because he was upset about legal accountability and remembering that he is indeed a convicted felon and would likely have faced more convictions had he not been returned to the White House. And then he said that he had been effectively saved by God to make America great again, almost this idea of being a messiah. But then you get to the second part of the speech linked to the executive orders, which are those that he considers to be his enemies. That he would set up against this. So rather than being for all Americans in a golden age, those 12 to 13 million, not just undocumented migrants, but also asylum seekers, they are to be under threat of deportation, day in, day out, even if the mass deportations do not start. Secondly, that he declared that the United States will withdraw from international organizations dealing with important global issues like climate change, at the same time that he is stripping away regulation from fossil fuel extraction and the World Health Organization. He effectively eliminated an entire group of Americans.
Right. Professor Lucas, of course, there are almost 6 takeaways, in my opinion, that we'll be diving deep into later in the program. But first, let me take Mr. Faz's opinion on this. Mr. Faz, what's your take on this, especially when we look at Trump, of course, saying that it is the beginning of a golden age for America? How do you take this statement? And also, like Professor Lucas alluded to earlier, that he said about God saved him. So there is a religious aspect that he has tried to bring in. How do you look at it?
Well, whatever the professor said, I think everything checks out. There's nothing to say anymore. Exactly. I mean, those were exact points that he just basically alluded to from the address. But it was a very brutal inauguration for the Democrats. Right, just a few feet away, were sitting now the ex-president, now the vice president, and all, some of those dignitaries from the Democratic Party and the Biden administration. And right in front, he basically said, the golden era starts now. And he outlined some of the stuff that he didn't like, his party didn't like what was going on during the Biden administration. Having said that, I think right now, I was reading an article in Politico this morning, a credible media. They said, it's by the way, it's like, left-leaning publication. And they declared Donald Trump as the most important American politician, most prominent and significant politician in American history right now. He stands tall. Look at his ordeal, that what he went through. And I think what he represents right now, he represents the greatness of the human will. Again, you can be on the other side and don't agree with his rhetoric, quote unquote. But what he has done is just unparalleled even in the American history. And he's been described, Miriam, first of all, thank you again for taking me on your show. He has been described as an unpredictable person, a politician. He ran, quote unquote, as a joke in 2016. But if you look at his history and if you look at his rhetorics, if you look at his programs, promises, and his actions, you see a very clear-headedness, a very clear and sharp mind, the one who knows how to maneuver the social media, the public opinion, and how to address some of the basic issues that the Americans are faced with right now. And that's the reason, even though he didn't, exactly win the majority of the people, I mean, 7.5 million versus 75 million votes versus 350 million Americans. So it's not an absolute majority. He doesn't speak for every American, but he knows what he's talking about and what he has done on day one, Miriam. He's done exactly what he's been promising. There was no surprise at all. Coming
to those executive orders, let me go back to Professor Lucas. Professor Lucas, how do you look at those executive orders, especially starting from, of course, immigration and border security? He declared a national emergency at the southern border. Trump promised to repel invasions. What does this mean for US-Mexico relations and also the regional stability at large?
Well, I agree with Faiz that this is an unprecedented politician. This is someone who is a convicted felon, who is a convicted fraudster, who has been convicted of defamation in connection with a sexual assault. He doesn't necessarily know in detail what happens with issues, but he doesn't care. So let's talk about immigration to start off with. U.S. immigration across the Mexico border between January 2024 and the start of this year dropped 75%. So it's a myth that immigration was sharply increasing across that border. But the reality of the issue doesn't matter to Trump because you need to use the migrants and the asylum seekers and the refugees as a punching bag, especially if things don't get better with the economy. So what do? You have the order for the mass deportations to be set up by suspending effectively the rule of law and by suspending the rights. In connection with the executive order, let me give you a couple of practical effects which are already affecting people. As soon as Trump took office, the website for applications from those who are on the Mexico border to legally get into the United States through getting asylum or getting a right to stay, that application was removed. 30,000 people with applications in the system are now stranded. The refugee resettlement program was suspended. Almost 1,700 Afghans who worked with the US government, some of whom are at threat from the Taliban and are still in Afghanistan, are now stranded. The processing of people from Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Haiti, some of whom say they're fleeing repression, that was suspended. In other words, this wasn't just simply a question of deporting, mass deportations. There are practical steps to go after migrants and asylum seekers by just simply calling all of them criminals, when in fact many of them are not.
Right, and let's talk about foreign policy, Professor Lucas. When we talk about Trump's promises, of course, he also promised to negotiate the Panama Canal agreements. Do you think this is a signal of America again moving towards interventionist policies?
I mean, this is Trump trying to grab a headline by acting tough and playing to the Trumpist. We will take back the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is legally part of Panama. That was recognized by the U.S. in 1979. There is disinformation spread by Trump and others that the Chinese military are in control of the canal. That is untrue. I can talk you through that. There's a Hong Kong-based company involved in running ports there. There are also US and Taiwanese companies running ports there. But it's just simply Trump talking tough, as he did with Greenland. I can take Greenland from Denmark. Well, no, you can't. But let me say something that may be of relevance on foreign policy, I think, to your viewers. You know, Trump doesn't play by the rules. He doesn't play by in terms of American foreign policy interest. He doesn't play in terms of, you know, what we might call geopolitics. He's a transaction politician who wants to look good. Now, why does that matter for Pakistan? I've been doing work with Indian media for the past 2-3 days. And Indian media are absolutely thrilled about this because they think they can play to Trump's ego and they're going to get business and technology contracts just like this. They think they have the edge to be America's favorite partner in the region. And I suspect you're going to see Trump being invited to India very, very quickly by Prime Minister Modi. There's going to be an issue for Pakistan here that Pakistan will be on the outside of that type of transactional politics. You may notice that almost the very first foreign policy meeting that was held after Trump was inaugurated was the Quad, the foreign ministers of the US, India, Australia, and Japan. That's Trump's transactional politics when it comes to what's happening in your part of the world.
Right. And Mr. Faz, what's your take on this when we talk about Trump's uncertain personality and, of course, its impact on America's foreign policy and how this is going to be impacting U.S. ties with other countries in his term? Let's start with his, of course, promise to rename Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Do you think this was kind of controversial and how might these, of course, this seems like a symbolic gesture, but on foreign policy front, do you think this is going to be sending wrong signals to other countries?
Of course, it's sending wrong signals and messages, not just to those countries, but across the globe. But again, what I would come back to is, he is just talking to his audience. You know, he's basically talking to the gallery. He's just, you know, he's into the appeasement mode right now. He's making sure that those who voted for him, they get paid back. So that's his, just like, these are his payback days, so to speak. He's paying back to them. So, but I do think, with due respect to the professor, I think, yes, he's been described as a transactional politician, but I think we just read a little bit too much into it. There's a theme in what he says and what he does. It's very clear. Yes, of course, he can, you know, visit India pretty soon, but it has to depend on the money that they shell out. You know, they said, you know, yes, the tradition has been that every U.S. president first goes to the U.K., but in last term he went to Saudi Arabia because they paid him, not him. They promised to buy $450 billion of products from the U.S. Now, if they pay, quote unquote, $500 billion. You know, if they buy $500 billion product, he will go back again as the first country in the world. So again, his message and his theme has been that, you know, everything is about money. Yes, whoever is the biggest bidder will get his attention. Pakistan, unfortunately, yes, I do agree with the Professor Lucas, that compared to India, Pakistan would not get as much attention. And this is basically what's happening with India, Mariam, is not something new. He's not the only president giving so much attention to India since the days of maybe, you know, Clinton or even before. Indians been getting a lot of attention based on their size, their middle class, you know, the money that they can spend on. Of course, you know, the Indian diaspora here, Indian American community, has been like almost 5 million Indians here in this country, and they you know, hold some very prominent positions, and justifiably, not just, you know, because of favors, because of their education. They're in think tanks, universities, businesses, of course, all the high tech, you know, the biggest companies.
That leads to, of course, the Indo-Pacific strategy that we would be focusing on later. But of course, now we are focusing solely on the points that were raised in his inaugural address. So, Professor Lucas, when we look at his speech, he also criticized Biden's approach towards Middle East. And of course, he said that his sanctions, especially on Jewish settlers. How do you see this term is going to be renegotiating U.S. ties with Middle East, and also how do you see he is going to be, looking towards the ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, first of all, the Gulf states will again, as my colleague quite well set out, they will be playing to Trump's ego immediately. So they'll be part of this equation. But if you get specifically on Israel and Gaza, watch out for this. We already have a story here, which is that just after the election, the Biden administration, when they spoke to Trump in the White House, said, look, you want to look good on your inauguration, work with us to get a ceasefire. Now, the problem here is the Biden administration should have been working on getting a ceasefire many months before that. But now what they had is that they had leverage in that Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, went to the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and said, Mr. Trump wants a ceasefire. He wants to look good. And if he doesn't get one, he's going to be upset. And, the fact is that Trump leverage working with the Biden administration did get a phase one ceasefire. But that's only a ceasefire for 6 weeks. So here's the key issue right now. Benjamin Netanyahu almost did not agree to that ceasefire because of 2 hard right ministers in his cabinet, one of whom, Mr. Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, has left the government and taken his party out of government. The second one, who is the finance minister, Mr. Smotrich, has stayed in the cabinet, but he's issued an ultimatum, which is he wants a military government in Gaza. Mr. Ben-Gvir has said there must be a return to military operations in Gaza after 6 weeks, or he will not cooperate with the government. On top of the fact that phase 2, there's this question of who governs Gaza. And the U.S. and Israel say it can't be Hamas, but Hamas wants to govern Gaza. There might not be a phase 2. There might be a return to war. And the issue there for the United States and the rest of the world is, Donald Trump's not going to claim credit if the ceasefire breaks down, but who's going to be the adult in the room to try to prevent further mass killing when you've got almost 7,000 Gazans who are already dead?
Right. And Mr. Faiz, how do you see this, especially when Trump, we know that promised again and again that, of course, he is going to be ending all the conflicts in the world, especially when we look at Ukraine war, and he is also taking credit for the ceasefire in Gaza. But how this is going to be playing out in coming days, we still have to witness. How do you view this?
I think he said 2 very important things in his during his presser, when he was signing the executive orders. One thing when he was asked about whether this ceasefire would hold, and he said he wasn't sure whether this would hold. So, that's very significant. Even he used all the leverage that he could, but still, he's not sure that it would, because, there's a massive discomfort and opposition within the Israeli society as well as the government about this. So judging by the common sense, so that means there was some relief for the poor Palestinians. Yes, because the Israelis, Netanyahu especially, didn't like it. So you at least see something positive for the Palestinians, and for at least some respite from the daily killings, even though they didn't quite stop. But you still saw some relief. And again, whether it's going to hold, he wasn't sure. So that's very significant to note. One very important thing that he said was about Gaza's location and the potential and the promises that the piece of land offers. Mind you, people have been saying, and I think probably MBS, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman would also be on the same page with the administration, new administration here, or maybe the Israelis, that, let's do something about economic development in that strip, rather than, just, going with the continuous killings on both sides. And in my opinion, living in Washington and talking and looking at all the developments here, I think it's probably not a bad idea to look at that, piece of land and more than 2 million people for the economic opportunities that that piece can offer, and that could be a good route to take. So if suppose Abraham Accord, I think is going to be revived soon, if that element is included, and if the Palestinians see some positive, some ray of hope in that suggestion, I think you'll probably see something very good, very positive coming out of this. Again, he's done not bad. I mean, first few days before he even took the office, what Biden couldn't do for 15 months, he just did it like within a day, and even 5 days before he took the office. So what was lacking there? Why Biden administration couldn't have that leverage that Trump, without being in the White House, had? Biden and his buddy Blinken, they continued the supply of the weapons, all the bombs, heavy bombs and everything. I mean, they didn't stop one single thing. They were just nicely requesting, please, please, please. That didn't work. And they didn't know that wasn't going to work. But here comes this guy who wasn't in the White House. He used some kind of a hammer, and that hammer worked. And you saw some relief. Netanyahu kind of, rubbed his feet, dragged his feet. He didn't want to go there. He eventually kind of acceded to the idea. Yes, okay, but he's still complaining. So we'll see what comes out on Ukraine.
Right.
I think it's very clear. He said it one more time that this war didn't have to start. It was due to Mr. Biden, some kind of trying to stop. I'm professor is no. I mean, this is a fact, Scott, that they wanted to poke Putin. Again, I'm not. I'm just a very neutral journalist.
Let me take Professor Lucas. His, of course, brief comment on that. And also, Professor Lucas, let's also talk about the point that you earlier alluded to about the plenty of executive orders that he signed on his first day, and one of which was withdrawing from WHO. How significant, in your opinion, is that? And do you think this is going to be creating a space for other regional players like China to get into the health sector?
I mean, I do think Faiz and I need to have a discussion about Russia and Ukraine, because the fundamental is that Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, and anything to obscure that.
But Scott, there was a reason. I mean, he was provoked into. I'm not saying professors, the Chicago, famous Chicago professors, and
John, you're showing up.
He was provoked into. This is not my say, okay? Because they wanted to bring Ukraine into the NATO, and that was a big, huge red line for the Russians. And this, that's what I understand. That this was one of the main reasons, and that's what I think that Kapan was referring to when he said this war didn't have to start. I think that's what he had in mind. Had you not provoked him or poked him,
let me put the fact to you, and then talk about the World Health Organization. Yeah, NATO wasn't considering expansion to Ukraine and hadn't since 2010. Yeah, and the fact is that in July 2021, Vladimir Putin set out a very long document saying it was necessary to make Ukraine part of Greater Russia. That it was Russian expansionism, and the pretext that NATO poked him into that. No, I'm not going there. On the World Health Organization, I think this is a serious issue that we can sort of find agreement on, and that is when you are talking about a world, not only one which is coming out of a pandemic, the deadliest pandemic in a century, but one in which you've got a whole series of diseases in terms of talking about prevention, in terms of talking about alleviation, in terms of making sure that those who are not as well off have access to health care, to have health infrastructure. For the United States to pull out of the World Health Organization simply because Donald Trump does not want to be part of international efforts, and because somehow his ego decides that the World Health Organization is enemy, it's just irresponsible. It is just flat out irresponsible to do
And
this.
what do you see are going to be global health implications of that?
Well, and the implications of this is that through the World Health Organization, you have doctors, you have scientists, you have medical engineers who are all cooperating with each other, who are all talking about how do we deal with the potential emergencies, or how do we deal with the day-to-day delivery in terms of healthcare. This is the way in a global community we try to preserve that. And Donald Trump has effectively withdrawn American expertise from this. And to give you an allied point, this is what it came down to. Joe Biden, who was a bit irresponsible by pardon his family, but he was quite right when he gave a preemptive pardon to Anthony Fauci.
Professor, you just call it irresponsible? I mean, that was just, amazing. Right, I mean, it was like just 2 minutes
Mr.
before.
Faiz, let Lucas complete, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean,
Professor Lucas,
when you have to give a pardon to Anthony Fauci, one of the most important men in trying to do something to deal with coronavirus, because Donald Trump and all the Trumpists had decided through their conspiracy theories to blame him for Trump's mismanagement of that. So what Trump has done is he makes the World Health Organization a scapegoat. He makes Fauci a scapegoat. And you're absolutely right that other countries such as China will use that to say, we are the good people here in dealing with international organizations. We are the good people that you can cooperate with, and don't deal with those Americans because you simply can't trust them.
Right. And we will be witnessing how this is going to be playing out for the global health system and for US as well. Faiz, your take on this, and then we'll be moving towards Trump's economic policies and agenda.
Yeah, I mean, again, from a very neutral perspective, Professor, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I have voted for on both sides, by the way. But the problem is there are some serious issues with these international organizations. And, as a journalist and as an analyst, I have been exposed to some of those misuse and abuse of funds. Look at the UN, the hierarchy. And there are, again, some serious concerns about what Fauci has done. And it's not my place to exactly come to...
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Lucas, let Faiz complete, please.
Yeah, I'm just asking.
This is okay to cross-talk. I mean, this is a good, lively discussion, Miriam. I don't mind being interrupted. It's perfectly okay. But the problem is... again, as I said, right at the outset, he's talking to his base. He's talking to the people that they voted for him. So, I mean, look at, Bob Kennedy Jr. He may be, right now, he's going to be your HHS guy, Health and Human Services guy, and he's going to be controlling almost every major health organization, in the US, as well as, of course, he's going to have a major input all around the world. So my job is not to prove wrong and right. Somebody wrong and right. My job is to see what's the reason he's saying these things. Are there some genuine concerns? In my opinion, yes. I think the Biden administration has gone too far in doing some stuff. Again, the Middle East is one example. Ukraine is another example, and the agenda, Scott. See, my family here. I have many family members. Like my cousins, my nephews. They're some of the stuff that they've been seeing in schools being taught to these young children in the name of, again, I'm not disputing any of that stuff, but those kids they came to me that, Uncle, we were ashamed to see some of these schools in Fairfax County, Virginia, I'm talking about. Of course, it's a blue county, not so liberal, but there has to be some limit. I think the Biden administrations and the Democrat, and one of the reasons that they lost this election was because they had gone too far. They had they should have come to the center and governed from the center. They didn't care about, I mean, look at,
Right, right,
since
right,
our
right.
audience is Pakistan right now.
Let's move towards the economic policies of Donald Trump. Professor
one
Lucas,
question.
what's your
Just
take
one-
on, of course, Trump's decision to impose taxes on other nations and, of course, enriching our own citizens? Do you think this is going to be, or this might spark, trade wars within the countries, and what are the global implications or for the global economy?
First of all, the idea that Trump can create an external revenue service to tax American companies that are based in foreign countries is absolute nonsense. International law is that companies pay taxes to the country in which they're registered to operate. So, let's get rid of that one real quick. I mean, the serious issue is the question of tariffs. Because once again, Donald Trump doesn't proceed on a basis of, all right, what's our economic strategy here? What's our economic tactics here? Donald Trump, who's a very good street politician, as Faiz has been pointing out, he plays to people's basically guttural instincts. He plays to whip up the crowd. He doesn't even know that tariffs are in effect not a substitute for income tax. So he doesn't know what tariffs are. What he does is he dangles them out as a threat and then tries to get people to negotiate on them. So for example, he's going to threaten China with a 60% tariff, where at the same time, he's going to say, I think Xi Jinping is great. He's going to threaten Canada, in part because he can't stand Justin Trudeau, with a 25% tariff. He's going to threaten Mexico with a 25% tariff and somehow get them to knuckle under and negotiate. I mean, the news flash here is that they have already renegotiated. That's the US-Mexico-Canada agreement from the first term. So it's Donald Trump whipping up the base, as we've been talking again and again. Oh, the foreigners are taking our money, et cetera. Fact of the matter is, tariff wars benefit no one. They don't benefit the country that opposes them. They don't benefit the country that's on the receiving end of them. And the real danger is that Trump goes global, is that he just simply slaps tariffs on every country, probably in particular sectors, which means not even Pakistan is immune from this threat.
Right. And Mr. Faiz, what's your take on this? How this is going to be impacting global economy? And also, of course, Donald Trump talked about reducing inflation. Do you think these steps are going to be helping American economy, or it is going to be having reverse impact?
But yeah, I think it's going to go exactly the opposite direction. I mean, how could you expect, by raising tariffs 50%, 100%, I mean, he said I could even do 100%, and then expect inflation to go down. If you go to any store here, a big, a small, medium, from Walmart to Targets to small mom and pop shops here in the DC area, every little thing from a needle to, a major appliance is made in China. And there's a reason why it's made in China. It's not made in China by the Chinese themselves. The American businesses take their technologies and, go to China, give it to them and say, can you please produce something like this for us? Because we don't want to pay an American worker their due wages. We would rather pay a penny.
So this is going to be impacting American manufacturers as well.
Yes. That's going to be, I do agree with Scott's point that, yes, it's just ridiculous that you say, you don't understand the difference between income tax and tariffs. IRS and ERS, yes, so external revenue service, that's he's planning to, so that would how much money that's going to take? You want a smaller government, for God's sake. You're a Republican, and you're creating all those new departments. How much money that's going to take? Do you realize? This new department, Doge, Department of Government Efficiency. So everything is going to be more expensive if Trump has his way, especially on tariffs. I hope sanity will prevail, and I hope this is part of his negotiating tactics that he uses. Then he goes full throttle and then retreats. So I probably
that was my next question. That is it just a promise, or is it actually doable?
It's doable. I mean, he can do whatever he wants. I mean, he's the president. He has the powers to do it. But
Right.
would it hold? Would it create issues for a common American? And mind you, there's one more. I mean, he's going to be a lame duck president 2 years from now. 2 years from now, the election cycle will start, and he wouldn't have much time. And again, the focus would be on, again, the elections and the messages. Then the other party is probably gonna, I hope they work harder to at least, cement their message. And then in 2 years, you'll probably gonna see some changes in Congress. They already have a very thin majority, by the way, just like 4 or 5 members majority. So if they lose majority in Congress, again, if the House is flipped, so you're gonna see a lot of, obstacles and impediments to whatever he's trying to do. But if he has his ways, I mean, it's not possible for his the agenda that he has chalked out and shared with the public. I don't think that's going to help. And the Europeans are very wary, very anxious right now as we speak.
Right.
They don't know what he's trying to even. He pulled out as a message from the WHO, and now. Maybe NATO the next on the chopping block.
Right,
So
there
if
is a
that
lot of
happens,
uncertainty. Of course,
exactly.
there is a lot of uncertainty at home and abroad as well. But coming back to you, Professor Lucas, Trump described his presidency as a fight against a radical and corrupt establishment. So is this anti-elite narrative still going to be working during his second term?
Well, that's the great snake oil salesman. Can he pull it off? A man who says he's anti-elite, but he claims to be a billionaire. A man whose unelected co-president is the richest man in the world. A man who surrounded himself at his inauguration with some of the wealthiest Americans, billionaires around him, and he says, I'm anti-elite. A man who says, I'm fighting corruption, who has been convicted of fraud, whose charity was closed down because it was going to be convicted of malpractice. A man who argues that I am there to benefit the working man, when in fact the working man has suffered from his policies, including a tax cut that benefited the wealthiest. Let me just leave you with an economic fact, which actually highlights the failure of the Democrats in one way and then the perverse success in the other. Inflation in 2022 was 9%. Because we were coming out of coronavirus, we were coming out of supply chains that had been compromised. By the end of 2024, it was less than 3%. American petrol prices had fallen by 40%. The price of many groceries had fallen, or the rate of inflation had fallen for many groceries. But because Americans remembered what happened in 2022, 2023, they said, hey, Democrats, what are you doing about it? And the Democrats couldn't answer that question. I think Donald Trump, and he'll use the excuse he's fighting the elites, et cetera, et cetera. That's all a smokescreen. If Donald Trump cannot show economic progress, and I'd say probably within a year, Faiz, if he can't show progress within a year, I think he's in serious trouble. And here's my worry. When Donald Trump gets in serious trouble because he can't actually govern, then he spreads that enemy within rhetoric further. He's going to go harder after minorities. He's going to go harder after immigrants. He's going to go harder after the supposed radicals. And I think, I now speak to you as a person rather than an analyst, I think this is the most serious threat to my country in peacetime since the American Civil War, because that's how deep the political and social division is. And my worry, because like Faiz, I'm not Democrat, not Republican, I'm an independent. My worry here is that the basic of America, beyond the economy, beyond immigration, beyond foreign policy, the basics of decency, tolerance, and respect have been eroded. And I'm not sure Donald Trump is going to help us get back to that decency.
And lastly, very briefly, tell us, Professor Scott, that with Trump's second presidency, in your opinion, what are some of the opportunities for US going ahead, and what are, in your opinion, some of the difficulties that US is going to be facing?
I think the U.S. has great opportunities. And again, I look to Faiz for, look, America doesn't always live up to its values, but America, in terms of what it talks about its values and what it can stand for, has been attractive to many, many people from many, many different cultures. America is a technology leader. America still has, for all the economic issues, probably the world's strongest economy in many respects. It's certainly got the most powerful military. America can be a very, very vibrant and open place. that takes place. But the problem right now is that all those positives are being sucked away because at the end of the day, it's Donald Trump versus the American system. It's Donald Trump who effectively says, I was chosen by God to lead you, but people are persecuting me. They persecuted me politically, they persecuted me legally. So what he is planning to do is to actually break American agencies, to break the Justice Department, to break the Defense Department, to break the Federal Reserve. And, you can either choose Donald Trump or you can choose the American system. No in between.
Right. And Mr. Faiz, lastly, Donald Trump has a very polarizing tone, but at the same time, he talks about unity. Do you think that America is going to be moving towards unity in his second term? Very briefly.
Yeah, he did say that, he's a unifier and a peacemaker, and I'm just being quote unquote a devil's advocate here. Yes, of course, America, I think it's in Donald Trump, I see a correcting phenomenon. I mean, the American society had gone in one direction. I mean, I had seen issues in the federal bureaucracy, serious issues. So I think there'll be some corrections. But like total destruction of these institutions, I don't believe it. He doesn't have enough time, 2 years max, or maybe, as Professor said, maybe just 1 year. So I'm still hopeful, and I think it has sent a very strong message to the Democrats. It's going to probably cause some, soul searching within that party. They would probably come around and bring some corrections and modifications there in their messaging. So it will serve a good purpose for the American society as well as the world at large.
Right. Thank you very much.
That's a positive.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Faiz Rahman, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Professor Scott Lucas, for joining us in today's program. Of course, we discussed about Trump's second presidency. Thank you for joining Game Changer tonight.